future of progressive radio. This is the Dean Obadala Show on SiriusXM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live Wednesday, May 29th. Just said Shannon Watts here for a full hour. Now, this hour is brought to you by the NRA. If you want free guns, I'm kidding. We're not going to have free. Look who's here. Julian Zelizer, Princeton professor, CNN contributor, co-author of the book with Kevin Cruz, Fault Lines, A History of the United States in 1974. And Julian wrote all the best parts of that book. Julian, it's good to see you here, my friend.
Nice to be here.
So, slightly big issue today. Exploded on the scene, 11 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to take some phone calls because I promised people in between, but we're going to talk a lot and we'll take phone calls in between because I want to hear from the progressive base. And tomorrow, I promise we will make a lot of time on this. Before I play any clips of Robert Mueller, what's your overall takeaway of what you heard?
He repudiated everything the president and the attorney general have been saying about what the report was about. He restated the summaries if you read the report, but he did it with the conviction of the person who wrote it. He was very clear. They're not convinced that no crime was committed by the president. They're very convinced there was an interference effort, massive one, by the Russians, which is the basis of the campaign. And again, even with the first part, it was murky in terms of the limits of what he could find. So I think it was a very forceful, Mueller-like statement about what the truth is. And again, he said, read the report because it's all in there, but members of Congress don't seem to want to pick it up.
You've written books. Like, you've worked very hard. You want people to read the book. Like, Mueller's like, I spent 2 years writing this book, folks, and you haven't read it. So he could have come out with the same signs Trump had, no collusion, no obstruction, had them on the podium, walked out and goes, no collusion, no obstruction, but he actually did the opposite. He destroyed the Russian hoax argument by going through first and foremost how Russia attacked our elections, reminding people there was indictments, and then he destroyed the idea of no obstruction, and I would never have charged Donald Trump. And we'll play this clip. To me, the last few seconds of it, to me, is the famous line that will historians like yourself in the future will go to. Let's jump down to clip number 5, please.
The opinion says that the Constitution requires a process other than the criminal justice system to formally accuse a sitting president of wrongdoing.
Oh, that wasn't the clip. Let's go to clip number 4. That was
as set forth in the report. After that investigation, if we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so.
So if they were confident the president did not commit a crime, they would have said so. As a historian, did that jump out at you as like,
absolutely,
that's a line, that's one of those up there, I'm not a crook?
I was watching, I heard it, and it was remarkable, even though it's in the report. Again, the fact that it's in the report is something that people seem to have missed or it's been papered over. But to hear him say it like that and to emphasize that in this press conference is a pretty dramatic thing to say about the president of the United States.
So let's put it in perspective as a historian. How many times have we heard career prosecutors, essentially a career prosecutor, say the words after investigation, if I was confident the president did not commit a crime, I would have wrote he didn't commit a crime. Yeah. That's a pretty stunning line, which is clearly telling us there's evidence there. Historically, have we heard another special prosecutor say this?
You've heard.
I mean, Ken Starr did his thing.
Right, Ken Starr did his thing, and he was under a law where he was allowed to say that, which Mueller was not, which is what he tried to explain today. And with Leon Jaworski and the Watergate hearing, you didn't get that because Jaworski's findings were private and they weren't revealed to the public at the time. So this is a pretty big statement to hear historically. And Lawrence Walsh, who did the Iran-Contra, didn't reach that conclusion about Reagan. He reached it about some of the people around Reagan. And this is a negative, but it's a positive the way he framed it.
So what does it say that we have Justin Amash, a Republican congressman, who ranks way conservative? I wrote about him for CNN. He's way conservative. He's not like a moderate Republican. He is saying Trump should be impeached. It's impeachable offenses. Yet the House Democratic leadership is not saying that right now. What is going on?
Well, he is a revolt of one within the Republican Party.
Which you wrote about for CNN.
Which I wrote about. It's a pretty strong statement that he made, and I read it several times to digest it. It was very clear-eyed in terms of what's in the report, and it was very forceful, both in terms of what needs to happen with an impeachment process and the fact that the Attorney General basically tried to hide the findings of the report, did a Saturday Night Massacre right in front of our eyes with a fake summary. And the contrast with the Democrats is amazing. I don't think it's going to push many Republicans to do anything. But the real question is, does it push Democrats? Because the contrast with where the Democratic leadership is, sit on their hands, continue with this middle way investigation that's going nowhere because of the stonewalls at this point, versus this libertarian right-wing Tea Party are saying, just read the report. It's pretty dramatic. I think a lot of Democrats won't like that contrast.
Before I play some clips from Gerald Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, after the statement came out, Cory Booker came out saying he's in favor of impeachment. Julian Castro, I think, already was there, but reaffirmed that. Of course, Senator Warren, Senator Harris already was for it. I think Eric Swalwell or Seth Moulton came out. At what point could the 2020 candidates be the ones that impact and lead Speaker Pelosi to change her view? Do you think there's a possibility
Absolutely.
of that?
They have the power of the public platform in a way most legislators don't. So Congressman Nadler can speak a lot on TV. Most people don't know who he is.
Right.
They're not following unless you're like us. You're not into the minutia of Nadler and his statements. But that's a very different thing, especially as we get into debate time, which is now a month away, with someone like Senator Warren or Senator Booker saying this and starting to change what Democrats are willing to say out loud. The thing is, the closer you get to the election, the less likely it is members are going to do anything. So there's a tension between the importance of candidates saying things and the more intense the election is, the less likely Democrats will do anything.
And Joe Biden today, the position essentially adhering to the Nancy Pelosi position, let this go the normal course, so to speak. What do you say to those on the right and even the left who are fearful that Donald Trump really, on the left, they're fearful Trump really wants impeachment. The right is just saying that. And Trump's saying, bring it on. I want impeachment. What's your view on, does it help or hurt Trump if there's actually an impeachment inquiry into Donald Trump?
Yeah, I mean, the standard argument is he's hoping for a backlash. So House votes to impeach him, Senate doesn't, Republicans are mobilized. It doesn't make sense to me. Republicans are mobilized anyway. His base loves him, so they don't care. And if the House basically says, you get a pass because we're not up for it, that will also excite him. It will excite his base. And I'm not sure that's going to really help the Democrats. My bottom line is Democrats can't think of every political calculation. It's unclear what would happen. You don't know which path is going to lead which way. And if you have this strong case right in front of you, at some point, the best bet politically, democratically, is to do something about it and move forward with the impeachment proceedings.
I agree 100%. And if Donald Trump had a scenario, and I was making this point earlier on the show, if he only had like a 50% approval rating among Republicans, I could see him actually wanting impeachment, because then maybe the rest of the Republicans who don't really love the guy, they rally around the leader of the party. Look how unfair the Democrats are. He's at 85 to 90% of Republican support. The rest really don't like him, I think, of the GOP. He's not going to get them any more animated. I mean, he's given them everything from, there's good people on both sides type of thing. How much more racism and bigotry can you serve up as red meat for your base? They are filled to the brim with red meat. And in fact, he's twisting this now. The new media narrative is going to be that he's trying to investigate the investigators. Mm-hmm. And they've had Corey Lewandowski, and they're going to have the show trials, and they're going to try to tie Biden to all of this, that he was in the administration when James Comey was investigating my campaign and all this craziness. Let's talk about the politics of it. And I agree with you, forget the politics, but here, having an impeachment inquiry and looking at what happened with Bill Clinton, that was like a 2-month impeachment inquiry. This would be longer. It's much more complex. Say it's 6-7 months. For that time, aren't Democrats on some level at least not controlling, but having a big impact on the narrative, where Donald Trump is just responding to what the Democrats are doing in this impeachment inquiry? Because when you use the I word, you have a formal vote in House Judiciary to have an impeachment inquiry. That's what they did in 1998, a formal vote. The media is going to cover this much more. The appetite for coverage is going to go way up on this kind of stuff. Isn't it good to keep Trump on the defensive?
It's good, and it's also going to be very revealing about the president. We're talking about really serious stuff, just as a reality check. That's what Mueller made clear. There was a very significant effort to sway the election by Russia. There was an investigation to see why there were connections between Trump officials and Russia. And the president, in many instances, clearly came to the line, if not crossed it, in terms of trying to obstruct that investigation. if you have impeachment proceedings that reveal more of this, that look into more of this, it's only going to make him that much less appealing to swing voters, to a majority of the country, which already doesn't like what they're seeing. And so if you just look at it from a crass political point of view, it's not like the best thing for a president. It's not good for any president to be impeached. No. And Bill Clinton even started at a much stronger position when that began. And at the same time, the charges were much less significant than what you're talking about now.
I'm chatting with Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor, professor at Princeton. So forget politics, from not looking at this through a partisan prism at all, just objectively, I have a feeling Speaker Pelosi and even some progressive I talk to say, well, if we do impeachment, we don't know how it's going to play out. It might hurt us. But underneath this is this subtle implicit idea that if we just do what we're doing, we're going to win. There's no guarantee we're going to win in 2020. Is there? I mean, am I missing something? It's not like we're up by 20 points and we're a month out of the election. In reality, you've got to do the right thing in your job, and not doing your job as a Democrat objectively in the House, it might hurt not just the turnout on our side, but even people in the middle going, these parties aren't that much apart anyway. How different? One of them cheats, the other side doesn't care about it. Yeah. So,
no, the kind of refrain from impeachment and the enthusiasm with Joe Biden as the most electable, quote unquote, comes from the same spirit. Just hold the line, play it safe. Play defense, prevent defense, and I'm a football fan, right. And 220 will go to the Democrats. But there is no guarantee. The economy's doing well. Incumbents do tend to win in recent decades, and the Republicans are fully behind this president. It's not as if they're defecting at this point. So who knows? And like you said, it's not as if the next year is going to be all about issues and deliberation over the best policy. If the Democrats drop this, what's going to happen is he will unleash more investigations than Democrats can even imagine right now on their candidates, on Congress, on the FBI, and that will consume the news cycle. And who knows how that plays out.
And, when I hear Speaker Pelosi, and today I'll play the clip, I don't have this in the clip, where she's like, well, we're legislating all the time. Yeah, you're doing a show in the House about what we will do aspirationally if we get the Senate and the White House. I get that. You can still do that. And she's upset the media doesn't cover it because the media knows you're voting on a gun safety law, which I agree wholeheartedly, but it's just passing one chamber. It dies in the Senate. The list goes on, issue after issue. This is different. This, you actually have the power to do something. There's only one body, according to the Constitution. Article 1, Section 2 gives the power to the House of Representatives to do impeachment. This argument that Nancy Pelosi makes, and I'll play the clip, so much about we have to get bipartisan support on the Senate before we do this, I think undermines what the framers intended with the Constitution. The House's job is to impeach if there's the evidence. What happens in the Senate happens in the Senate. They can't control that. There have been numerous times where there's been an impeachment in the House and there was an acquittal in the Senate because you need 2/3 of the votes, including there was a Secretary, I think, of War who was Secretary here in 1876. He was impeached on charge of criminal disregard for his office, accepting payments and everything. If they said, you know what, I don't think we're going to get a conviction in the Senate because they didn't, then this guy would have taken all these bribes and no one thought anything of it. He took bribes, there's no doubt about it. He ended up resigning because he was pushed by the impeachment to resign. And they had the trial in the Senate. He was not removed, but he already had resigned right before the trial anyway. So I want to play the Nancy Pelosi quote for you and get your reaction. Here's clip number 13, Matt.
Nothing is off the table. But we do want to make such a compelling case, such an ironclad case that even the Republican Senate, which at the time seems to be not an objective jury, will be convinced of the path that we have to take as a country. I'm very proud of our House Democrats. They've been very, shall we say, conscientious about how they've reached their decisions, and I think it's like 35 of them out of 238, or maybe it's 38 of them out of 238 have said that they wanted to be outspoken on impeachment, and many of them are reflecting their views as well as those of their constituents. Many constituents want to impeach the president, but we want to do what is right and what gets results. And we have to remember, so yes, there are some, and the press makes more of a fuss about the 38 than the 200.
By the way, I spoke to Congressman Jamie Raskin earlier, who was one of the 38, who made it very clear there are far more than 38 who want to impeach Donald Trump. They're just not outspoken for very. And he goes, if you polled our caucus, overwhelmingly wants to impeach Donald Trump. The question is, when do you do that? What kind of evidence do you need? And he's like, it's not about. He believes there's momentum building towards impeachment. And that was before Mueller. He said that on Monday. Now he believes there's more. What's your reaction to Nancy Pelosi saying it's only 38 out of 238?
I'm surprised. I do think Speaker Pelosi's a very good speaker. I've said that before. But to dismiss it in some ways as the concern of the radical left or a unruly part of the caucus, I think at this point really misses what's going on, or she's consciously trying to frame it in a way that this is her upholding the center, upholding pragmatic, reasonable leadership versus the progressive base. And that's not really what this is. The concern about impeachment is now pretty broad. Even at moments, Biden has said if they continue to do what they're doing, the administration, this leads to impeachment.
Right.
And part of what a speaker does is to lead. And on a difficult issue like this, and it is difficult, it is a mechanism of last resort. When it's needed, the speaker has to push the caucus to say, let's take this step and let's start the process. She's not doing that right now.
I want to play a clip of Gerald Nadler, who's chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, which is very important. That committee is the one charged with actually the impeachment inquiry, and he'd be the chair of it. His words were much more blunt today than even Nancy Pelosi's statement. Her written statement before that was not nearly as blunt. So here's Chairman Nadler. Here's clip number 7, please.
The special counsel has clearly demonstrated that President Trump is lying. He is lying about the special counsel's findings, lying about the testimony of key witnesses in the special counsel's report, and above all, lying in saying that the special counsel found no obstruction and no collusion. In his statement this morning, Special Counsel Mueller reaffirmed his report. It found substantial evidence that Russia attacked our political system, that the Trump campaign benefited from Russian interference, that Trump and those around him repeatedly welcomed Russia's support, and that throughout the subsequent investigation, Trump sought to obstruct Mueller time and time again.
So what I'm waiting for is Gerald Nadler to go to the next step. And then here's the next step. He's asked point blank. Here's clip number 8.
Make no mistake, no one, not even the President of the United States, is above the law.
Congressman, will you move then forward with impeachment proceedings? And given what Mueller has said, meaning that he feels as though the report says all that he needs to say, will you then subpoena him to testify in front of Congress?
With respect to impeachment question, at this point, all options are on the table, and nothing should be ruled out.
When I was watching Nadler saying the first part, I'm like, he's going to call for impeachment. I said, here it goes. Because I was pitching an article to Rich at CNN about something. And I go, this might undermine. I said, so he's saying all this stuff. He's lied. He's obstructed justice. He's giving conclusory statements of crimes. And at the end, he goes, nothing's off the table. What is going on?
Yeah, well, this is where the Democrats now find themselves. Nadler is bound in some ways by what the leadership wants.
Sure.
And he could be bold, but it's unlikely. And so I think Nadler is closer to impeachment proceedings than the speaker, but he's not going to go there yet. His making this statement is a way to lay out the case, a little like Mueller did, and say, okay, what comes next? But it will still depend on the party, on the Democrats doing it. And at some point, if everything he said is true, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest Nadler is simply repeating the evidence that exists, Democrats are then part of legitimating this form of presidential behavior as much as Republicans. And they can say all they want about the politics or the need for it to be slow. But basically, a president can do this if Congress doesn't react. That's where we will end this presidency.
There was a report a week ago. Remember they had that caucus on a Monday, last Monday, before Speaker Pelosi got under Trump's skin. Mm-hmm. And in the early reporting, it said Nadler was in favor of impeachment then. I'm like, it's going to happen because the chairman wants it. And then he walked back. He was walked back probably. And it's, look, I've made this analogy in a way for better or for worse. No one knows what the right answer is.
Right.
You won't know until the autopsy, right? And you're like, well, we lost. And you can blame it on, why did you do impeachment, you morons? Or if you lose, you go, why didn't we do impeachment? So your earlier point to me is, I agree 100% with the idea of there's no right or wrong political answer. We can have a good faith debate among Democrats right now. Mm-hmm. And no one can tell me with any certainty, neither of us can say, here's the objective right thing or the objective wrong thing. That's when I say you go to what is the right thing to do in the big picture. And I think the Constitution mandates having an impeachment inquiry right now. They're charged with in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution to do that and find what they may find. And if you're wrong, so be it. Like if you have the hearing, you go, we don't have enough for articles of impeachment, so be it. But if you have enough, wouldn't we rather lose fighting for the principles that we are different than the Republican Party and that a president like this who accepted help from the Russians, as Mueller said, there's no doubt in the words I read earlier that Russia perceived that Trump would be a better president for them and that Trump perceived that electorally they would benefit from being helped, that's not okay, that witness intimidation is not okay, obstruction of justice is not okay. And if we lose, the American people go like, we're okay with that, so be it. Yep. I'd rather lose that we're fighting for this country is about what we believe it is and articulating a positive vision than going, oh, let's be timid and not rock the boat. I don't get this.
No, that there's a partisan logic, just what you said. And there's just a bigger logic that when you have such egregious behavior coming from the presidency, and everyone seems to agree on this. No one's saying this is not happening. Right. They're just saying we don't know what to do. At some level, you have to take up the responsibility of being a member of Congress. Listen to Congressman Amash, if that's what they need to do. But, you reach a point where dysfunction is so powerful that it can cripple this response. I think that leaves the democracy in a worse place besides what it does for Democrats.
And what I love is Julian is saying that not as a Democratic activist, but as a historian who's seen this, who's written about this, and is sharing with us that if you're on the fence about should you do an impeachment inquiry or not, look at the bigger picture about what our nation is supposed to stand for. What do you want the Democratic Party to stand for? And that should be your touchstone for making the right call here. And if that's what it is, it's got to be an impeachment inquiry, not an up and down vote tomorrow, but an inquiry on this. Let's take a break, come back. We'll take a few calls because a lot of people wanted to talk earlier. But let's go out to Justin Amash, a minute of him in Grand Rapids, Michigan last night. The Republican congressman, the only one who's principled, who's got a spine. Also like me, has a Palestinian refugee father. His mom is Syrian, so he's 100% Arab. I'm only half. But no one would guess. People are stunned that he's Arab. Yeah. And I met him at an Arab event. He was getting an award from the Arab American Institute years ago. I was emceeing it. He's not going to remember. I met him there. But he's good friends with Grover Norquist to give you a sense of how conservative this guy is. He's loved by the Club for Growth and these kind of right-wing groups. He's anti... On every issue, we would disagree, but this one. I mean, truly, this is how far right this guy is. He gets a higher score on conservative numbers than Lindsey Graham. He's up there with Tom Cotton. This is how far right-wing this guy is. So he's not a moderate. He's not a liberal. He's a far-right guy, but he's a constitutionalist, and he's showing us he puts the Constitution over Donald Trump, and that's what we need more of. And as Democrats, if we're not going to do that, then we're nothing. If we're not going to put the Constitution over Donald Trump, how are we any better than the Paul Ryan-controlled House? So let's go out to Justin Amash here, clip number 10, and come take your calls, 866-997-4748.
I think it's really important that we do our job as a Congress, that we not allow misconduct to go undeterred, that we not just say someone can violate the public trust and that there are no consequences to it. And if you get a chance, I encourage you all to read the tweet where it lays all of this out. Mueller's report lays all of this out. And I'm confident that if you read Volume 2, you will be appalled at much of the conduct. And I was appalled by it. And I think we owe it to the American people to represent them, to ensure that the people we have in office are doing the right thing, are of good character, aren't violating the public trust.
Progressive values are the best of American values, and we need to keep fighting for them to save our country.
Don't go anywhere. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. His show, your voice. 866-99-SIRIUS. 866-997-4748. Let's make a difference together. This is the Dean Obadala Show.
On Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back. I'm looking at the image of Bill Barr with Rod Rosenstein and the guy with the beard. It was like a before and after picture they had done so many times. So we're here with Julian Zelizer. Let's take some calls. I really want to hear from you. I want to hear what your view is now. And I'm not here to debate my fellow Democrats or progressives on this issue. I'm trying to get a sense of the room, so to speak. I see polls, but where's the energy? Is it time for impeachment? Is it just time to go traditional investigate? It's not like the Democrats are doing nothing in the House. That would be unfair to say that. They are pursuing through subpoena power the financial records of Trump, the personal tax returns, emoluments violations during the normal course, but it's in litigation now, even expedited track. The briefing schedule's like July, so, all right, here's Chad from Michigan. Chad, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, Dean. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure, my friend.
Love your show.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Hey, and here's the thing, you're a comedian, and,
arguably. Allegedly.
But I think one thing that some people have said,
right?
It's been said.
People have been saying, a lot of people have said, Dean's funny, not me. So hashtag not funny. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and so you're making my point. The one thing that timing, and I think that's what's important about this situation right now. It's about timing, and I think as we hear our Democratic colleagues kind of dither, it deflates the moment. I think that's a very high risk. Look, 90% of those Trump voters are going to come out to vote. That's not really the question. And in fact, that's exactly what happened in 2012? in the last presidential there.
16.
Yeah.
What year are you living in, Chad? What year are you in, Chad?
Oh my God, it seems like it's been forever.
It does.
1912.
No, you're right. No, you make an interesting point.
Yeah, so and that's what happened in with the Clinton. And the thing is that Democratic voters didn't come out. But the proof of this theory can be seen in our last midterm election, where in fact you had Democratic candidates who actually even opposed
Speaker Pelosi. Right, Chad, you're breaking up. You keep breaking up. Good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're breaking up. But last point. Go ahead. No, you're making good points. Go ahead. Then I'll take you off air and I'll chat with Julian about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, what they did is that they proved the thesis that if you stand on principle, even against folks within your own party, it will activate voters, and that's exactly what it did. And I'm afraid that if we don't proceed now, that we will actually, the gamble is in action, and we will lose Democratic voters. All
right, Chad. Thanks. Usually I talk to people longer, but I want to take it shorter because Julian's here and get him to respond. But thanks, Chad. I appreciate it. So what do you should the question not be what's in the Democrats at? I think a lot of Democrats, even if the Speaker Pelosi doesn't do the right choice for you, we so know what Trump is. The stakes are with Trump. He's an existential threat to what we believe as progressives, that the values of this nation are. So that's a given, right? Shouldn't it be maybe on some level, what's going to move that sliver of people in the middle? Is that part of it too? Or is it just be what concerns our base? Julie, I'm asking you as a historian here. What do you think history tells us?
If you think of 2016, the strategy was appeal to the sliver in the middle. And they lost a lot of the enthusiasm and turnout. And many people say that was more important in places like Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton not drawing the same kind of enthusiasm as Trump did. And so it's easy to make and the stakes were very clear in 2016. It's not if no one knew what Donald Trump was about. So it wasn't all discovered in the last 2 years. And so I think there's a flaw in that logic. We live in an era where a lot of the electorate doesn't move, really. That's just the reality. So it's not just slivers. You're looking for turnout. And so it is possible that the party depresses itself by picking a candidate who's not generating enthusiasm. The insurance is the anger and heat toward Trump is enough to overcome that. The timing issue, timing's interesting. Impeachment is a big deal. And to do it, you have to do it with strength. And I do think the counter to the argument that now we need more investigations and we have to look into every area, you do lose some of the timing and momentum that comes out of this very substantial report pointing to serious wrongdoing. Not a little of it, a lot of it. And I do think if Democrats don't think about that, it becomes harder to actually pull that trigger.
So and this is not at all a slight at any Democratic candidate, and I'm being sincere about that because I like them all, and I'm hoping we get the strongest and best one that inspires us and we can win. But say Speaker Pelosi prevails in this, we never do an impeachment inquiry, do traditional stuff, and then our nominee ends up being someone who is viewed as electable but not a great deal of passion. Those two together, what do you think that could be the impact on the electorate in 2020?
I think that could be problematic for the Democrats. I don't think that combination inevitably beats President Trump, given all the factors he has going for him and given this Republican enthusiasm we see. Again, not base enthusiasm, but party enthusiasm. And so it's no good. If you're counting on the election to correct problems that you see in how someone is abusing power, that's a big mistake, because instead he might get reelected. You might have now normalized this form of presidential behavior, and then all bets are off in term two.
I have to say this bluntly. I would rather lose 2020, as horrible as that sounds, but do the right thing now and have an impeachment inquiry of this guy and say this is unacceptable. And the American people are so going to choose in 2020 election that it's acceptable to work with an adversary and accept help and have your son meet with people. It's part of Russia and its government's plan to help you. And I'm going to say, Russia, are you listening? And weaponize WikiLeaks, knowing in October 2016 that it was from Russian military and still weaponizing and obstructing justice and emoluments violations. And the list goes on. If the American people are fine with that, then as heartbreaking as it is, so be it. But if we didn't do our job and hold this guy accountable, I'd rather go down fighting against this guy than go down on the old school mentality. Because if we've learned anything, the old ways don't work against this guy. The old philosophies of how to run a campaign don't work. You've got to take the fight to him. You've got to keep our base passionate. You got to keep our base animated the same way they do on the other side. Because ultimately there are more of us. I saw it in the midterm of people who don't like Trump, who want to give people a reason to vote for you. Show them you're going to fight for them. You're going to fight against crime in their face. If you're going to sit there and go like, well, we're going to play this safe. Aren't we done with playing it safe?
Remember 2018, the midterms, there were issues that mattered. So
sure, healthcare was very, very big.
Right. But the other issue that mattered was checking Trump. It was a call from these swing districts to do something about the imbalance that existed in terms of Republicans being able to do whatever they wanted, and this president running roughshod in ways that are not normal. Again, you always have to remind people, as a historian, as an analyst, this is not normal stuff. And so the idea that this doesn't matter not only to the base but to swing voters is also a misread of the midterms. And it's one thing to talk about impeachment as this abstract idea, but then you're talking about the issues behind the inquiry, and that troubles a lot of Americans, also in purple districts.
And polls, and I have to look at recent polls, but as of a month ago, they asked Americans, do you think Trump committed crimes before getting to the White House? 60% said yes. So,
yeah.
Richard Nixon famously said the idea your America deserves to know if your president's a crook. Well, in this case, we know the answer. 60% say he's a crook, he's a criminal. And is that okay with you or not? Because your 401k went up. And does it all matter if the economy is down? I'm not hoping for this, but in a year from now, if the economy is down, I think Trump gets dropped. Because that's all. I can't guarantee it, but I'd likely, because that's all he's got going for him at this point. Also, historically, if you look at 538, the average on polls, right now, Trump has the highest disapproval of any president 800 plus days into his presidency.
Yes.
And it's just remarkable to see how unpopular he is. All right, let's take another call. We're going to keep the call shorter than usual. We're going to take a few here with Julian and then get him involved. Here's Manny in New York. What's up, Manny? Manny, you there? Manny? I can hear him breathing. All right, let's see. Here is George in Alabama. George, how are you?
Good evening. How are you doing?
Fine. How's everything in Alabama?
Hot.
Fair enough. Very literal. Go ahead. So what's going on, George? What do you think about this? What should we be doing?
I think we're doing it. I think we're already in the middle of the impeachment process. It's just that we're not saying it's in the impeachment process. We're doing an investigation. We're getting the paperwork. We've already won court cases.
Interesting.
And I believe Nancy Pelosi is everything but saying we are in the middle of an impeachment process. She keeps saying we want to bring people along.
Mm-hmm.
Keep getting investigation. Keep winning the court cases. I believe we were already in the impeachment process.
So you're happy with the approach that's going on right now with Speaker Pelosi, there are various, I think there's 5 committees engaged in oversight of Donald Trump right now, with subpoenas being served from House Oversight to House Financial Services and Judiciary, and the list goes on. So you're happy with the approach that's going right now, and you think it might lead to ultimately impeachment? Because do you want impeachment ultimately, George, or no?
I would rather him resign. I was thinking get to the point where I'm expecting one day that he's going to get his Secret Service detail to have Trump jet sitting out at private field and get on it and just take off.
Which will be fine. He can keep Air Force One. We'll give him fuel for a year and no questions asked, and he disappears. But, all right, George, thanks for the call, my friend. I appreciate it. What if Speaker Pelosi were to say, she said today in her longer comments that we have 5 committees looking into Trump. And that's very true. And they are pushing. They're going to court over it. They're fighting over this. What if she were to say, we are actually doing an impeachment inquiry, we're just not calling it that? Do you think that would satisfy some?
It might. It's not. There is something that is the impeachment inquiry.
Right,
this is not it.
It's a formal
This
vote.
is oversight.
Right.
And so the question to her would, what's the end game? And where does this all go? Because the other way to see it is this is a middle way. It's a little like the select Senate investigation that preceded impeachment for Watergate. But this is coming 2 years into the presidency. It's coming after a Mueller report is out there.
Right.
And the stonewalling and the court challenges, it's just going to take a lot of time. And it's not centralized, as you have with an impeachment inquiry. It doesn't have the weight of an impeachment inquiry, which means that every challenge from the administration would be much weaker if that's what Congress was doing. And every effort to stop the investigation could become an impeachable offense. So it would be much stronger if they went that second route. It might be that's Pelosi's strategy, but the risk is she just gets tied up in this and fulfills Trump's accusation that they're just investigating to investigate.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I'd love you to touch on because a lot of people have called and talked about Watergate, but what went on in that Senate Select Committee? What happened there before the formal House committees? And why it started in the Senate as opposed to the House Judiciary Committee. So when we come back, we have Julian Zelizer give us a little history lesson that might be instructive on what's going on here right after this break. Look, it's time the media start calling out Trump's false statements for what they are. Lies. Trump is a liar. And by the looks of it, he's lying every day and twice on Sundays.
The Dean Obadala Show. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live Wednesday, May 29th. Julian Zelizer is here. Quick thing, folks. Look, everyone's got credit card bills, unless you're Julian Zelizer. You live by cash. He's a wealthy guy throwing cash around all over the place. The rest of us credit cards, and a lot of us have debt, interest that you're paying. If you could pay off your credit cards, consolidate them under one loan that has a lower interest rate, you'll have more money for yourself, for your family. You can buy things that you want, maybe go on vacation or just put it away whatever you want. Well, here you go. Lightstream, a division of SunTrust Bank, has now a remarkable credit card consolidation loans, and starting at 5.59% APR with AutoPay. That's nothing. And loans between $5,000 and $100,000, there are no fees. You just pay interest rate on it. And you can actually get your money in the same day when you apply. And it's a division of SunTrust. It's Lightstream. You might not have heard of that, but SunTrust, everyone's heard. It's not like my Uncle Tony loaning money to people, which he used to do years ago in Lodi, New Jersey. Not going to get into it. This is actually a reputable bank. And guess what? Because you listen to the show, you get an additional interest rate discount. That's right. I'm saving you money on interest rate. Go to lightstream.com/Dean. You got to use /Dean. That's LIGHTSTREAM.com/Dean. Subject to credit approval. Rate includes 0.50 AutoPay discount. Terms and conditions apply. And visit lightstream.com/Dean. So, Julian, what happened? Remind people so we have finally the answer. Watergate, we all know about the impeachment hearings, but there's images of Senate people involved. Why was the Senate involved when impeachment begins in the House?
Well, first, the House conducts hearings with a guy named Wright Patman, and the hearings are killed because no one really believes there's an issue there. And so then it turns really to the Senate. There's more support to do this again in 73. Mike Mansfield, who's the Senate Majority Leader, ultimately comes out and says, let's use this platform, which traditionally the Senate was the platform for high-level hearings, the McCarthy hearings and hearings into organized crime. And so this was a natural place to put it. And so the combination of those two gave you in 73, before impeachment, these hearings where people saw members of the administration, the Michael Cohens of the era, tell the public on TV what was going on and all the bad things that the administration was doing. And they accomplished what Pelosi talks about today, kind of building a case.
So that went for 7 months?
Yeah.
Is that where John Dean testified?
Yes, that's where John Dean testifies. That's where the Watergate tapes are revealed by Alexander Butterfield in the middle of this, and they're televised. So this is pre-cable, pre-C-SPAN, so people were watching it. There was no equivalent to the Mueller report that comes out in the middle of this. And even the coverage in the media wasn't what we have today, which is incessant and ongoing. So the Senate took up that space and taught the public what Nixon was about.
So you have that for 7 months, and then it goes to House Judiciary. Is that where Peter Rodino was?
Yes, Peter Rodino is the chair. That happens in early 74. When that happens, there's less support for impeachment of Nixon than there is right now for President Trump. Just as a reminder.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the Senate didn't build it to a solid majority
no,
over
it didn't.
7 months.
So that's where Pelosi's wrong. They built the case, but they didn't build support. And ultimately it was through the impeachment proceedings.
And how long do they do impeachment proceedings?
From it's either January or February, and it ends in July. After the House votes for articles of impeachment, including some Republican support, which wasn't coming until the very end. And then Nixon resigns in early August.
So 5 to 6 months in impeachment inquiry. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that changes public opinion. So again, and that's a great point, as Julian is a historian at Princeton University, to make that it's not these kind of hearings in a vacuum or just typical oversight hearings, traditional hearings that changed public opinion. It was under the guise of impeachment that got the attention and got people to really focus on this, and it changed public opinion.
Right. And even the Senate hearings the year before, which don't have the impact of changing public opinion as much as they needed to, they're still different than what we see today. There were one set of hearings. Everyone was covering just that. So they had this amazing platform, which none of the committees today has anymore.
Right.
So it was very different, even that. But even that committee, that wasn't sufficient to get to where Congress eventually was. It was through the impeachment process formally starting that they reached a conclusion, both parties, that Nixon really had to go.
it's interesting to think that the Senate, even with the tapes coming out, but then it was finally the court order that said you had to release the tapes, and that's what changed everything.
And that was with impeachment, and so it was released. This was grand jury material, and the House Judiciary Committee got access to it. They hear the tapes. This is very late. This is in July of 1974, where they hear this, and that's finally when Republicans say, "Okay, enough." So it took a long time to get to that place.
So when you look historically, where is Justin Amash? Is there a figure in Watergate on the Republican side that was early? Because he's very early in this process.
Yeah, not this early. I mean, the figure everyone remembers is William Cohen of Maine, who's on the House Judiciary Committee. And there's a moment, everyone should see it on YouTube, where they're voting on the articles of impeachment. They're going around the room, and they get to William Cohen, who's a standard New England Republican. And he votes in favor, and it's like the earth shakes. Because still, even then, it wasn't clear any Republican was going to go along with this. So maybe you could say Amash is like that, but we'll see, because we know how it turned out with Watergate.
Right.
And we saw other Republicans fall in line against the president. I don't know if that's going to happen.
I think it's so interesting, too, the idea that we're all talking about today's hyper-partisan. Well, those days, they couldn't get people to come along either to Richard Nixon. Now you look back at Nixon like the guy was a crook. What was going on?
Right.
And using the government as a personal apparatus to get after his enemies. And so, all right, we got to go to a break. Let's come right back with Julian Zelizer after this.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
This is the Dean Obadala Show, exclusively on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obadala Show. Julian, I'm sorry we didn't get to more calls tonight. Tomorrow we're going to have much more time for calls, and I appreciate Julian coming here and especially giving us history lesson. I think it's so useful because many people cite what happened with Nixon and the idea that somehow that got public opinion to come over, and it was not the Senate hearings that got public opinion. It was the formal impeachment inquiry. So Speaker Pelosi is misplaced on relying on normal congressional oversight. It's got to get to impeachment inquiry. At least that's the lesson of
I think it's the lesson, yeah. And I don't think the lesson of the 90s is that this all backfires on the party. But we can look at that in another episode.
All right, my friend. Julian, thanks for being here. Folks, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm on Twitter at Dean Obidala. Follow Julian at Julian Zelizer.
You got it, yep.
And Dean at deanofradio.com if you want to drive me an email. Here's Julian's cell phone if you want to call him and talk to him. I'm kidding. Have a good night. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to chatting with you here tomorrow on the Dean Obidala Show.